recording to the cloud. This is still week 3. R622 people and friends and guests and colleagues who might be popping in to watch this or might watch this later on. This is an extra session in week 3. Susan Bridges has kind of contacted me in the past week about some of the research and writing that she's been doing. And I said, that sounds interesting. Wouldn't you think my R622 class and learning environment designs would kind of wonder about hybridization of learning and the combination of sync and asynchronous during the pandemic and the types of classroom structures that were created to help faculty succeed, or at least get to a level that they were comfortable with so that their tensions would go down. So we want to hear about both the structures that were created as well as, well, structures physical, as well as structures mental to deal with the pandemic and post-pandemic world, because most places are still doing a lot of synchronous forms of instruction or hybrid forms of instruction. The hybridization of learning is something that's been near and dear to my heart. Charles Graham and I did the Handbook of Blended Learning in 2006, and we came up with the idea to do it a few years before. So Susan's with us, newly minted, sort of retired, but I'm pulling her back out of retirement tonight. She'll give us a slice of a keynote she recently gave. But first, we're going to chat with Susan for a while. And I don't want you to go too long on this first question, but can you give us some of your background? And I can read. I've given everyone your bio, and so they've seen your bio. They've read through some.
So now you want the real me, right?
Yeah. So she was the director of the Center for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning at the University of Hong Kong, and she's been doing research more in an ethnographic manner, and I don't know what her sample size is like, and if this has been published related to the hybrid spaces that she's designed. So Susan, can you give a little bit about the background of your background, and tell us a little bit about the background of the hybridization, the spaces that are being designed at the University of Hong Kong, and maybe affiliate universities that reached out and used you as a benchmark for what was happening. I'm sure there's much interest in it. So walk us through that, and then we'll chat some more.
Sure, fabulous. Thanks very much for the invitation. Great to meet your TAs and students, and welcome to any other folk who joined this meeting and presentation. So who am I? So I came to the University of Hong Kong in 2007. I have one of the most unusual academic pathways, I think, that colleagues will recognise. So I started in what we now probably would term as the role academic developer with the Faculty of Dentistry. And so they created an education post to help them move into the major curriculum reform that was coming up in Hong Kong in 2012. That curriculum reform was basically, if you think about top slicing from the P to 12 and giving 1 year to undergrads. So it shifted the entire university horizon across the sector and was a great opportunity for reform. So they created 100 academics for the 100th anniversary of the reform, and dentistry decided to appoint someone from education to help them in their problem-based learning curriculum to think about moving forward. So my original appointment was called e-learning. And so they wanted to infuse problem-based learning with a lot more E in whatever form that might be. So that was a wonderful period with those colleagues looking through a fully integrated problem-based curriculum, not just as a pedagogy, but as a curriculum design, which is quite rare. So that was a very unique program. And then we looked at how we would make it more E in all sorts of ways, embedding learning management systems, and it moved towards redesigning. So we created a simulation area. We also, with the problem-based learning, tore that apart and redesigned that to be much more of a blended approach. And we we won an award with QS Wharton on that, and they called it presence learning. And I thought that was actually a really interesting category that they called it, because we were being physically present but immersed in a blended environment. So that work with dentistry started me off on this career of thinking about pedagogy and technologies. And
Susan,
then
I'll stop you for a second there and
sure.
just say Indiana University went to problem-based learning as well. And it's fairly typical for students in instructional systems technology, our department, or what we can now call learning design and technology, to find a placement in the medical field. And dentistry is one that's, and the medical school in Illinois kind of kickstarted all this PBL with a guy named Howard Barrows, I think, and some others.
Yes.
That were the big PBL people, and they came to IU and gave talks back 25 or 30 years ago. It stayed. But the dental schools have found that they still need some face-to-face instruction. Not all dentistry can be done in a PBL manner, but that could be another conversation, right?
It's a very interesting conversation about how you move from the PBL conversations for reasoning, and then case-based reasoning, and then you move into the application for skills development. So that's always a tension in medical schools around the world, where you move from the epistemology, the content, through to competency, and so there are always tensions there. So yeah, so had a great time, ended up as an assistant dean with the Faculty of Dentistry, something I had never anticipated that would be in my career profile. And then I moved back to my home faculty with education, and they wanted me to lead up a reform of the postgraduate diploma in education. One of the, and it's a government funded postgraduate program, highly sought after, and they wanted to build on that whole integrated PBL program design for us to move into a different structure. So that was a 3-year chairing project, and then 3 years as the deputy program director to just shepherd it through that phase of full implementation. So then I moved into the directorship for 3 years for the whole university, just in time for campus closures and pandemics.
So ChatGPT sent me a few questions I'm supposed to ask you.
Good on it.
I entered in your little blurb about what you designed there, and one of the questions that it asks is, what are the main challenges faced by traditional classrooms in supporting collaborative and interactive learning in a hybrid university environment?
There you go. Good question, ChatGPT. Leads, nice segue to the design issue. So what we found is in the history of Hong Kong and Hong Kong U's pandemic response in terms of campus closures, return to campus, all of these things that colleagues and we in professional development were negotiating. We experimented with 3 weeks of what we're now calling synchronous hybrid, right? And so we'd gone through the full campus closure, totally online, remote, distance ed mode, through to, okay, the faculty need to come back to campus. Students, if they can make it to campus, and of course, international universities, students distributed everywhere. Plus, we had strong border closures with the mainland as we're having, movement of folk controlled. And so colleagues were asked to teach from campus, but students were given the opportunity to either come in or Zoom in. We were using Zoom as the platform. And so we had 3 weeks, we surveyed colleagues, and it's probably one of the largest amounts of qualitative responses we've had from an open-ended survey to colleagues, as they were just really grappling with this. So, they grappled with it from so many areas of concern. The tech in the rooms was not ready for this. Yes, emergency remote teaching, good articles on that. So we had the tech in the rooms just couldn't cope. Colleagues couldn't even orient themselves between teaching to the physical and also teaching to the online. There was always some sort of sense of disconnect for them, both technologically and pedagogically. And so one of the key issues was engagement. How are we engaging students? So we closed down that idea after 3 weeks and returned to basically a remote model, because it was just too challenging and colleagues couldn't cope. Then the University Grants Council at that time gave funding to us all to develop a showcase, Hong Kong Special Administrative Region teaching space. So it was an interesting time. They were very clever administrators and forward-thinking leaders. And so I was just helping my team, who had not been distance educators themselves, to help colleagues become distance educators. So we were in survival mode. And then the University Grants Committee said, okay, here's some funding, go and build something that will be a new learning space. So that was a new challenge for me as director, and that really had me step back and think in whole new directions.
Well, ChatGPT then asked this question: what challenges, you just mentioned challenge, did universities face when attempting synchronous hybrid teaching at scale?
Yeah, so the scale part's still not, so as I said, colleagues just said, you know, I can't do this. I can't manage the group work. Synchronous group work, super hard. Talking with we're part of the Universitas 21 network, and we've had a learning spaces working group, and I've got the link for that for you guys for that group. So they've been building showcase of what's been happening globally, and I actually brought in KU Leuven because KU Leuven had an experimental space, and brought that into the group and said, look, you know, I think these people are doing really interesting things pre-pandemic. So the idea of how you got what Birmingham was calling the Zoomies and the Roomies, how you got them engaged and collaborating in this kind of platform was really synchronously was probably the major challenge, and that was the toughest goal in building this room. That was our stretch target, if you want to call it that.
So you might want to take a time out now to show a few slides of what you've
done. Sure. So, okay. Let me share screen. All right, so we've done lots of the intro stuff, and we've talked about the PBL stuff. So I'm going to charge us forward, teaching for hybrid futures. I think what's also important to remember is we actually commissioned this group called EAB. Kurt, I don't know if you know of them. They're actually globally based, but quite predominantly US. And they have a lot of universities in their network who they're a consultancy service, but they're also feeding us lots of tips and advice. And this was just from their website, where they were looking at the future of work. And we know that businesses, we see jobs advertised as remote now, or hybrid, or flexible, etc. We know that the future of work is not about everyone getting in their car and turning up to an office space anymore. So we see these sorts of changes in office designs. And then, of course, they were also looking at technology-enabled classrooms, and you can see that active learning, still people are trying to fit out classrooms for active learning, and whatever that definition may mean to you, and lots of work on working out lecture spaces that are more interactive with group table settings, etc. And this 360-degree seating, I thought that was really interesting in some of the designs. We scoped everything that was going on, and lots of there were a few universities who were moving to the Greek amphitheater idea with your American basketball videos in the center. So this hybrid was there. So what was happening in parallel with these conceptual shift with post-digital education. and they'd had me doing a piece for them, a creative writing piece during the pandemic. We did three contributions, 88 authors contributing our experiences during the pandemic. And then I started reading more and more from this post-digital science and education journal and this whole notion of the post-digital. And I think, Maggie Savin-Baden also had contributed to some work on PBL and technologies, an issue I'd done. And so I kind of was in sync with all these things she's talking about, this need to equip learners to navigate these liminal spaces. So I thought this was really important. Then there's this nice special issue, came out in 2022, this post-digital trajectory that's going to transcend the inaccessibility of the physical classroom. So that resonated with me. And then I love this idea about multiple spaces where the digital, material, biological and social are connected and co-determining. So we're seeing that impact of these spaces on the learning experience. We had Tim Fawns give a talk with us. He's I think he's at Uni Sydney now, and he gave a lovely introduction to post-digital to our colleagues as well. But we're seeing this notion of becoming entangled, and he's talking about entangled pedagogies. So I thought that was good fun. So our planning process was kind of going on with the post-digital colleagues conceptualizing this, was putting into words lots of the things that I was exploring with my team. Our original space was considered quite spacey, quite exciting. We had these pods in the room, we had all of these levels, but people got headaches. There was no capacity for dual mode. We had these group tables, etc. So we had these imperatives. Of course, we had the come through the pandemic. But also, we could see, now, is this just a novelty effect that we're going to spend money and build a classroom, or is there real need for the university? And one of the things was that our university campus is expanding within Hong Kong and then across the border. And we went for these three principles: flat, flexible, and interactive. So, flat was because this had all this tiered spaces in it. So we knocked out everything, tore it apart, went for very flexible. So someone could teach in any preferred pedagogy that they wanted, whether it was large class, seminar, formal thing, right, lecture-based formal thing, right through to synchronous hybrid group breakouts, and aim for interactive. So as I said, we were
Susan, go back. Can you go back?
Yeah, sure.
I think I presented in that room in 2015.
That's where I was trying to figure, Kurt, where we had lined up, because I think we've lined up online since then. But yeah, rightio. So you would have been, if you came for the centre, you would have been in that space. Yeah.
I got pictures to prove it. And for my class, IU is got a project called Mosaic for active learning spaces. And the Mosaic people will be with us. I think it's in early October, like the 7th or something like that, or the 4th. So we will hear more about active learning spaces and what Indiana University is doing. But I've been in that classroom and it's great. I like the way that the tiered kind of thing, and you get
but it was actually tough to. Sorry, go on, Kurt. What did you like about it?
Oh, I like the kind of the eye contact with the students in the room. That was easy to make, and it was easy to get a sense of what people were working on, and and I just like the communities that were formed in the room. I mean, I felt a community building there. So
yeah, so building communities of inquiry, and that's it. We had these, we had the desks with the monitors beside them, etc. There's lots of features in there that were really good. So in some ways, it felt tragic to tear it apart, but that was our remit. That was our professional development space. So we looked around.
You tore it up?
We'd done lots of work. We tore the whole thing out.
Oh,
Kurt.
God.
I hope you like what we did with it. Yes, well, as I say, that was designated and handed to me as a project. Here's the room, here's the money, go forth and make it a showpiece HKSAR space. Yeah. So it was still well over a decade old, and so it shows how modern it was at the time. So we've done lots of work pre-2020. We had a Learning Commons that was, you know, an international showpiece space. We had colleagues playing around with inquiry-based approaches at scale. So, for example, our colleagues in law were doing case-based PBL style, but in massive halls. Our colleagues in medicine, we've spent a lot of time team-based learning with technologies, and we published a bit in Nurse Education on sociomateriality in that space. So we've been playing around with all that pre-pandemic. Also on the QS Wharton, I was a judge there, and this is one of the a business, an MBA program where they had the teacher still very much, you know, the traditional didactic stage on the stage, but with the bank of Zoom. And this one actually had different feedback in terms of some learning analytics feeding in. So that was quite an innovative, quite a few years ago. When we were looking at, and then down the bottom right is KU Leuven. And so what they were trying to do was to get the Zoom people engaged with the classroom people. And so they had created this bank at the back of the people who were seated physically in the room. And so you can see the professor speaking to the Zoom group and so forth. So that was, KU Leuven was getting closer to me feeling like we were entangling. But we wanted to take it further. A key issue was table design. And I'd done quite a bit with the PBL table designs back in dentistry. And this is still, this one with the purple seats, that's still the preferred model. If you want to say you're doing group work with someone zooming in, you put a screen at the end of the table, and everyone sort of is looking to the left or right to this person on the screen. And even consulting with some of the Office Solutions people and so forth, they're still putting the Zoom people on the wall, right? So what we wanted to do also think about, and remember, this is the professional development space for faculty, you know, and there are some wonderful new co-working spaces around the globe, and that goes with this about remote learning, you know, people wanting to work from Starbucks, etc., instead of an office space, and the new office spaces being very different. So we were also looking at these office spaces which were much more warm and inviting. The design principles for our Learning Commons was shopping mall meets library meets Starbucks, so that sort of feel. And so I thought, well, how can we bring that into, for adult learners, into the professional learning space for colleagues? So those were some of the things. Then we really thought about large screen affordances, and I wanted to get the idea of running. So this is a design mock-up where we're thinking about Susan, what was the biggest challenge and what remains the biggest challenge. Yeah.
When you transition slides, for some reason we get a little bit the audio goes on us a little bit, so that last couple sentences we didn't hear, and you might want to pop out and turn your video off until you're done with the slides, maybe. See if that might help there, but you definitely want to repeat it because it seemed really important.
Apologies, as I say, I'm working from I am working remotely myself, so I'm not in my office space. So what I was saying here was that we were trying to build on this notion of the what we did with the Learning Commons. Did you catch that part?
Yeah,
where
we caught that one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so building on those notions of these working environments, we wanted to then think about this digital canvas first of all. All right, what do you see? And one of the things that I really found that colleagues had struggled with was managing Zoom rooms, right? The breakouts. So sitting in, we had open classrooms for one of our festivals. One colleague with 130 students had multiple TAs at work to be in rooms and so forth. But for a colleague taking a class without TAs, really just to know what's going on in all the Zoom rooms, because you're jumping from bit to bit. And I thought, how can we crack that nut? How can we actually let a colleague who's physically in a room see what's going on in all the Zoom rooms simultaneously? Okay, so that was something we worked on with our techs to enable that. So that was part of the design principle. So here you can see in just a design mock-up that you can see the visuals of all of the Zoom people. You can see the presenter if you've got an online remote presenter. And then when you've got the breakouts, you can actually have on 2 panels, you can have all of the breakouts visible. And I think that's a major advantage for a colleague who's trying to be interactive with the Zoom group. So that was one aspect, one problem working on. I think we wanted to think about group work and how we could make this much more seamless. So we were thinking about the design of the tables and how they fitted in with the screen and how a teacher moves through. So in, for example, the earliest installations of Panopto, I just said, we're not going to do this. This is years ago, because they just put it as a fixed camera onto a lectern. And I said, you've just trapped the teacher to the stage. You know, our colleagues want to walk around and interact. So motion tracking, live feed, going to the Zoom participants was very important if we're going to have that fluidity rolling. Then this whole notion of the hybrid interactions in teamwork and groups and teamwork, that was really tough. We spent actually a lot of time on this, thinking about how we could put tech together, thinking about the table. So I even for a little while was looking at those tables that are used in early childhood and tables that are used in design meetings where you actually have the screen embedded. But we couldn't figure a camera view that was going to work well for the Zoom people in that one. So that was another thing we constantly playing around. So these core principles, you know, Kurt and I were communicating about this. So the Educators Horizon report, you've got that, and they were looking at, good job. And they were certainly looking at this. So I think the key point here is my drum that I was banging loud and loud was how could we put the virtual / online group members at the center rather than the periphery of breakouts and whole group discussions. So how do we put them at the center? So this is our final design. Kurt, do you want me to keep going, or do you want to have some questions first?
I think you can keep going. If this is the final one, we can have questions after this. Yeah.
Sure. So final design, yes, Kurt, there you are tearing out that room. so
I'm crying.
Really, I know, but we worked on sustainable materials. We wanted it to be warmer. So one thing that a piece of feedback when I said environmental factors, that room was very harsh. Sorry, my internet connection's unstable. Are we back?
Yep.
Okay, good. So the environment was quite harsh on the eyes. I had colleagues walking out with migraines, etc. So, you know, things weren't perfect there. We also work, because now one of the big problems that the techs were telling us was that the audio in a synchronous hybrid lecture room or tutorial room was the most challenging thing from a technical perspective. So this is a multi-partnership. You're bringing in everybody from a state's office, architects who have no idea what we're talking about because they've never seen anything like it, and right through to technicians and instructional designers. So this is where we went. So we've got all of that audio baffling at the back. We have a living wall, so the green is actually alive. So really, this was a externally closed. So it was an old studio place. That's why it's 2 stories. No external lighting whatsoever. So we really wanted to make it warm and bring this co-design of the physical and the virtual, bring life into the room. And so we have the green wall. The projectors, they're throw projectors onto just a white canvas. So we didn't put giant LED screens in. and there's a good reason for that. And then the desks and this console, everything can move and pull apart. And that desk configuration, we actually got patents for it in, both Hong Kong and China. So that's fully painted as a hybrid learning mobile desk console. And I can pull that apart for you. So you've got the large screen affordances, the big wraparounds. You can break them. You can have that as one giant wraparound, or you can break it into multiples. The desktop, there's the patent stuff. I'll give you a bit more on the desktop. So just in terms of flexibility, so everything moves. The wheels, and that was something we saw with the socio-materiality piece in the team-based learning, which had 350 students in the room watching how the wheels on the desk and changed group dynamics. So everything can move, and that's the flexible idea. So here we've got Philip Dawson giving a keynote from Australia, our learning designer at the time, Don, having a chat with Phil, and we've got all the online participants up there on the Zoom. And then we've got, you can do a U-shape or anything you want. We also can disengage the console from the desk. And so here's one of the instructors on the postgrad program and a certificate program, and Peter's chatting away with some of his students there. And here we get an image. Here's Dr. Tris Key. Luckily, Tris joined us just after we started the project. She's a qualified architect and instructor designer, so Yahoo. And here you see the desk at work. So we've got two people working together. There's a 360 camera at the top of those joined touch screens. And the Zoom person is visible on their screen, but also up on the main screen. You can throw to that camera. So all of the units have a CPU, and it links up and throws to the big screen if you want. And the 360 camera allows you for the teacher to join and be part of that group visually. There's a dongle there, so you can throw the group's work up onto the large screen if they're doing something interesting and you want to ask them to share, and then you put them into Zoom share mode. So lots going on pedagogically in terms of opportunities for engagement. So here we see a better shot. So Tris and myself team teaching, two groups doing breakouts, and we can see the groups on the screen. From the Zoom participants' perspective, what the 360 camera does is gives them a 360 view of their table. So they get panoramas. So they see everybody at their table and they're at the same eye side. So the eye line is there. And so they can all chat. They have their own, we use Jabra units there. So they then speak very clearly, the audio is fine. And then we also have another mic system where that can switch to the main room. So lots going on there, lots of excitement. This is when we had the deans turning up for opening, and the deans all trying it out and very excited. And lots of faculty development has gone. This was, fully launched a year ago, and over 2,500 people come through the room, and it's been on the news, etc., etc. So I thought what was really interesting is that when we did a leadership survey with the Universitas 21 group, and we've been, thinking about the future of these sorts of rooms. Remember, ours is an experimental space. One of our colleagues said, yes, these things are interesting in terms of the space and how you fit them out, but it's the institutional support, the staff support, and the pedagogical challenges are more interesting. So just before I left this summer, we had a big meeting with the States office to look at how the room was working, how the room could possibly be scaled up, etc. So we had lots of conversations at that institutional level. We're also thinking about, we have already put in at Hong Kong U the COIL initiative, and I'm sure, Kurt, you're very familiar with this sort of work, where you're thinking about collaborative online learning, and students will be in a shared course with colleagues from around the globe. And this sort of room, we think, can really help with that, where time zones permit synchronous, but even with the asynchronous work. So that's kind of a quick overview of the room. I don't want to go into the study yet, if you want to have a little chat about that.
Yeah, let's have some questions and then maybe go to this part of the study anyhow. The COIL acronym was coined by Penn State as well, but it may have stood for something else. I like yours better, I think. But they were doing some innovative things at Penn State before the pandemic. And it was part of the online learning consortium, I think. In fact, I can try and look while others ask questions. But before, I would just want to ask just a quick thing is, the person who brought me there to your place was a former student of mine, my former advisor. His name is Dr. Jingli Cheng. I don't know, he was in instructional design for a couple of years. I don't know if you met him there in 2015-ish, but he left and went.
I would have, yes. No, he moved into, if I'm thinking of the right person, he moved into the private sector.
Yeah, he went to Walmart in Shenzhen, and now
that's it.
Yeah, he's good. He's a very smart guy. He ran the Chinese Student Association here, as part of that, and ran our GIST, which is our Graduate Students in Instructional Systems Technology. He's a smart guy. He was at Visa or MasterCard for a bit. He was at Stanford for a bit. He's done many HP, Adobe, Macromedia. He's been at many of these places, the Federal Reserve, and now most recently a law firm in New York, because his wife's in New York, so they're there. And anyways, that's his little side comment. I know my student Bo has a couple of questions for you at least, and then Sahal wants to jump in. So Bo, why don't you go first, and then Sahal, and then whoever, I think Lucy has to want something after that. So.
Yeah, Susan, first I was just going to say, I thought it was really cool. The first slide that you popped up there. Sorry, my daughter's wanting to say hi.
Hi, sweetie.
But my wife actually graduated from the University of Leicester in England there. So I saw your accreditation there for that slide. So that was pretty cool. But I was kind of blown away by some of the stuff that you were demonstrating in the learning environment there. And I was wondering, okay, number one, was there any funding restrictions that were placed on you, or were you kind of given like full reign of what you could do with that space? Number two,
and sorry, Susan, why don't you take off the slide so we can see everyone here? Stop.
I was just about to do that. Very good. Yeah.
The second question is kind of like a piggyback on there, but it was, if you did have those restrictions, what would you have done differently to enhance it even more, to make it more accommodating for every type of learner, and to address their needs, whatever the environment that they're actually in?
Okay, thanks, Bo. Yeah, so the money was, so I was allocated funds by the university, and then they matched that a bit. So I was given carte blanche. So yes, it was open to whatever I could imagine. So that's why I often call it our Imaginarium, a place that we've imagined and something that we hope will stimulate imaginations for colleagues. The green wall, when Dr. Key arrived as an architect, we were just in the build phase, and she said, "Can I expand that?" And I said, "If you want to take over the green wall, it's all yours." So she played around with the design for that one. What I did ask for, thinking of moving forward, one thing that the current director is Professor Cecilia Chan, and Cecilia was central to all of the design thinking as it was a big team effort by the whole center. But, Cecilia and I were talking about how could we perhaps, because this is a professional development space, how could we perhaps introduce some of the makerspace ideas that were coming up? Because colleagues, academics, haven't really seen unless they have kids at school, haven't really seen the whole makerspace evolution in schooling. And it would be kind of fun to give them some sort of, you know, hands-on tinkering spaces in the lab. And so I actually wanted to build another layer at the top and make a tinkering space and put an instructional designer in there, but we didn't. And the other thing that I thought have always found particularly challenging on campuses for faculty is that casual faculty generally don't have a space. You know, like there's you know, full-time faculty, you know, there might be some hot desking, but
Yeah.
casual teachers, and there's a lot of casual teachers in higher ed, right? They don't get a space. And so I said, if we could somehow have the top layer as a separate secure entrance and just give casual faculty a space and maybe just have a green wall behind them to do some recording or something like. So those would have been other add-ons that I would do. But at the, you know, we ran out of time and money, and the synchronous hybrid was already a major goal.
I love like all of it. I mean, that was an amazing space. I work out of a co-working studio the way it is, and so it's converted warehouse kind of thing. And I like what you just said about the maker space. We have a full maker space in the back of this co-working studio, and it's really neat just to see the way that, you know, the startup professionals kind of gravitate towards that and utilize this in a creative way. It's really cool. I really appreciate all of that. The last question that I had here on kind of the same topic was everything that you guys have done with this. Has there been any like crossover learning that either other universities, government organizations, or I guess I had other like schools at Hong Kong University have drawn on from your experience and from what you've provided for learners here?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so I did mention we had 2,500 guests. It actually went really quite big in Hong Kong, right? So we were actually on the news. So we had a press conference. We were on the TV news, real time, not a special program. It was a slot on the news in Chinese and also the English radio station. I had a live slot on a 1-hour news session in the morning. We have school principals. We had the Association of Secondary School Principals come into the space. We've had the Productivity Council. Dr. Key had a knowledge exchange project linked to it. So the Productivity Council people were all looking at the patent and, you know, working out how they might want to scale that out. One of the school principals, I think what's been interesting in the pandemic period is the human urge for creativity and making things. So that translated to lots of building projects put in place by universities and schools. And so it was very interesting. One of the school principals of a major international school here, he heard I did another live thing for a Facebook Live chat morning brunch with one of the RTHK ladies, and he said I had to stop the car, Susan, and I, because I was going to run out of Wi-Fi, I had to stop the car, and he immediately sent me emails. He immediately brought his staff in, and they've been given 2 plots of land by the government to build new learning spaces. So really, you know, this is a really hot topic. I think Kurt's course, looking through the course syllabus, I think, this is really cutting edge stuff. So congratulations to all of you for being so engaged.
2 plots of land way far away and some remote island in Hong Kong, or 2 plots of land?
No, next to their school down south. So they've done very well. And I know another private school that's been given an interesting space. We have some very interesting novel schools. I mean, my own husband was the ship's captain for one school that had an old heritage pirate ship shipped over from the US, and the kids would use that as a learning center and go sailing and do all sorts of integrated studies things on it. So there's lots of exciting stuff happening in the school sector in Hong Kong. And it was actually one of the schools that had approached us about makerspaces many years ago, and they'd already got into that big time. So, yeah, it's an exciting area to be working in.
It definitely is. And have your imagination run wild with all this funding. I mean, I just haven't seen that kind of funding around here for a while. It used to exist, actually. I will, before we go to Salhao's question, point out to Bo that University of Leicester, I've been at a couple of times, and I don't know if Susan knows Jilly Solomon, who wrote E-Moderating and E-Tivities. She was the Pro-Vice Chancellor in Western Australia, and she was down in Melbourne at one of the universities there. I forget which one. And also now
I think I was referring to Leicester University in England. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this whole Jilly was at Leicester University in England and ran the Media Zoo. And
I thought you were. I was
getting there. So before that, she was a big name. And she had me do the first invited talk at the Media Zoo. So I've been to Leicester a couple of times. Good Indian food in Leicester. So I recommend her books, E-Moderating and E-Tivities, to anyone. Does Salhao want to bring her question up now?
Yeah, Dr. Bridgen, it's just nice to meet you. And I have to tell you, I'm from Macau.
Oh, very good.
So I'm just so excited to see you will be here, and because Hong Kong, Macau is so close, and you may have been to Macau. So
I've been.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so that that's interesting to see what have been done in the University of Hong Kong. And I think my question is kind of similar to both question about the budget. So maybe I have to twist a little bit because you have already answered some of it. I wonder if you have just a limited budget, if someone has a limited budget, but they still want to turn the classroom into more interactive, what would be the must-have or the first thing? If you had to give up some other things, what would the first thing I must have for the interactive classroom?
If you're saying synchronous hybrid interactive, so your Zoomies and your roomies working together, then for me it's the desk with putting the Zoom people in the center of the desk, and for the teacher to be able to see all of the breakout activity on a large screen. So you don't need as big a canvas. You could do it with 2 screens almost, but being able to monitor, set a group task, and be able to have the group feel like they're a real group. Because many teachers before just found the whole thing unmanageable, and they were saying, okay, Zoom people, you go join this group. In-room people, you do this activity. And, it was a bit of a divide and conquer kind of approach, but everyone's trying to survive this. But I think as we move forwards, we have to think about how we can really have this enhanced blending and bring the Zoom and the room people into group work together. So the central 360 camera with the team around it, physically around it, and the online people feeling that they're part of that group, and not at the periphery, not stuck at a table at the end or against the wall. That's great for group work. For the teacher to be able to see all of the breakouts visually, what are they working on? And you can have a collaborative tool. So what we do is put a collaborative tool out there, and the teacher can scope all the different groups working on their various collaborative tools, whatever they are, and they can then come and join a group and be part of that conversation. So it allows a teacher to have that fluidity in the room. So that's what I would go for.
Yeah, I'm sure that's important. And allow me to ask the second question. I will turn the mic to someone else to ask you questions. I'm sure they have a lot to ask you. Could you share your experience of bringing the faculty members to use what you have created? Because I'm sure, like for professional development for faculty, even though you have the facilities, the classroom, it doesn't happen overnight, right? What have you done?
That's right. So that's actually the case study I've got is just one example of us trying to figure out how to how to actually, I don't particularly like the word upskill, but it's probably the best one available to my poor mind at the moment, to help faculty try this out. And the great thing about that little project, you know, it's got to be, you know, use your traditional action research style framing. It's got to be something where you co-plan, implement, review, reiterate, co-plan, implement, review. It's got to be that cycle, because there's so much going on that you want to see how it fits with the course design. So we were just really trying to focus on the synchronous hybrid and how you facilitate it, how you teach in the moment with it. But all of that means you've got to go through co-planning. And the co-planning is from the course design co-planning right through the tech rehearsal. We actually did online rehearsals, and I often am the one who sits on the Zoom, because I'm very conscious that we orient to the physical person rather than the Zoom person. So I'm on Zoom while we're doing the rehearsal, saying, I can't see this, I can't, who's talking to me now, da da da, and really pushing that interactivity with the Zoom people. So that it's very intensive at the moment. We've just done this one-on-one. So far, it's been a lot of modeling, you know, inviting colleagues in and then showing them how things work. But yeah, to get to that deep level of orchestration, that's going to be more of a one-on-one, which is time consuming.
Yeah. So you do a lot of like coaching, right?
Yeah. So think of a coaching model. Yeah.
So the faculty go to you, or how do you like attract the faculty getting into that?
Yeah. Well, it's always, when it's an opt-in, then it's always about the networks you create. It's about how you build, bring those colleagues in. For some, for example, our MBAs moved to a hybrid, and they actually promote the course as hybrid. So we didn't come in and co-design, but I think once you get to the point where you've got programs starting to be pushed as being, or promoted as being hybrid, then that will bring new faculty in to say, oh, how am I going to teach this? You know, so it'll be more of a needs base as that moves forward. Now, remember, also Hong Kong U is undergrads is a face-to-face experience. So the only way we'll see synchronous hybrid move forward is, you know, hopefully no further campus closures, but if a campus closure, or when we move into these COIL spaces, the collaborative online learning spaces, international connections. So we really have been working for a long time on projects to internationalize the curriculum for a predominantly local undergrad. Now, they might have gone to international schools, etc., but most of them, 80% of our students are fed in from local schools. So it's very kind of cohesive cohort in that respect.
Wow. Thank you so much. It has been so valuable. Thank you.
You're most welcome. I'm great to talk to someone from Macau. I enjoyed Dan Tart a lot.
No, actually, my daughter has just made a egg tart, a Dan Tart. That's why I
okay, spend some of it. Well, enjoy.
Beautiful place, definitely is. Before Lucy asks her question, Bo wants to jump in with a question.
Yeah, Susan, you'd mentioned that you had, I think it was your consortium of secondary leaders or something like that had come over there. What was their response to this, and has there been any carryover in the facilities within their buildings at their schools with regards to providing opportunities for, you know, hybrid or blended learning like this at the local level for them? I'm thinking I'm coming from a K-12 education space here in Indiana, and we were not prepared for the pandemic, and I feel like it's kind of stagnated since then as well, like the preparation for, you know, something like this occurring again.
Yeah, and it's hard if it's framed in terms of, you know, preparation for unforetold, disaster experiences, right? So if it goes into that mode, then it really doesn't become part of your daily classroom teaching. That's why I think the COIL initiative, because that meets our university educational aims, right? So why do synchronous hybrid beyond the need to connect people who are physically disconnected because of reason X, right? So what's the educational, value added to introducing this into a full classroom with kids who are already back physically, right? So that's why for us, because our undergrads are back physically, right? We don't have the conditions necessary. Now, I think this at university level, I think synchronous hybrid has fabulous opportunities for the postgraduate space. And I think, I have been banging that drum a lot in the last year in Hong Kong, because I think that's fabulous opportunity for Hong Kong to position itself better in the postgraduate space and on a global scale. For your undergrad population who are 30% live in halls of residence, they want to come on campus, the only time they'll do synchronous hybrid with you is if they don't physically want to come in the room and they'd rather go to the Learning Commons or the coffee shop. And that's not really, a great reason.
Yeah.
So the COIL, for the undergrads, being engaged with an international peers in some kind of project-based, project-based learning. That's where I see the benefits, and that could then attach with the K-12s as well, as you're connecting kids across spaces and with other groups. But for the actual class, physically in the classroom, I don't see any great reason except for sick days or something like that. Yeah.
Thank you. So I will point out
think
that
Lena.
sorry. I think Lucy's going to jump in first, then Lena, then Amelia. I'll point out that Indiana University's School of Ed was built to be a demonstration site for technology and education. And therefore, in the mid-90s, we were to experiment with video conferencing, combining PictureTale and See-You-See-Me. You may remember those technologies. But so we were using synchronous to the remote parts of Indiana and remote parts of the world. We did video conferencing with people in Beijing, people in Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur, people in Seoul, Korea, and other parts of the world. We learned about what you just said earlier. You have to make sure those people on the remote site are engaged, not just the people in the room with you. So we were doing synchronous blended environments before some of my students were even born here. But Lucy was born back in '96. I know that. Lucy's coming to us from, you can see she lives in Florida. She's from Brazil originally. And so Lucy's going to jump in. Go ahead.
Yes. So my question could be considered twofold. I see that, of course, it's very flexible, but I'm curious to know from your observations, were adult learners really taking advantage of that flexibility and personalizing the space to their preferences? Or were they waiting for the instructor to come in with instructions for classroom management? And the second part of my question is if accessibility was a key consideration, one of the key considerations in the design of this learning space.
Terrific questions. Thanks, Lucy. I think if your first one's talking about the teacher and their designs, working with the colleague, for example, we have large introductory first and second year courses called from the Common Core, and they're integrated, very exciting, stellar feature of the undergrad curriculum at the university. And one of the Common Core teachers had his own model. So he'd already been experimenting with this class for a while, wanting to move away from the traditional lecture and tutorial model. So he was doing a half-hour speed dating thing, and it was an interesting, and students were on rotation, etc. So quite complex for him to manage with 130 students. So he said, I want to experiment with that in the synchronous hybrid space. So that was really, really great fun for us. So he brought that to us. I had, and I was thinking, half an hour, how's this going to work? And so it was really, really fast. And then students rotated in. But it was fun because this is what we based our ethnography on. And so we were videoing everything, screen capturing everything. I was in a room next door observing. I came outside as a student was leaving, this young, first, second year student. And I said, how did you like the class? He said, oh, yeah, great. So how did you like this, the hybrid with the Zoom? And he just went, awesome. And I thought, okay, money well spent. My job is done.
Yes.
Can I just write that at the bottom of the paper and say we're done?
Right.
Publish
it. So, like that was us working with a teacher's design. I had not come up with that design at all. And so we played around with that, we tweaked it and so forth. And so he really wanted to work with the students doing a collaborative piece, so some kind of collaborative document. He had a follow-up question from class, and then they would work on that, and then they had to submit it all within a half an hour. So it was really fast-paced. And looking at how he could see all of the different groups working simultaneously on the large canvas, and then go and then join the conversation. So it was really helpful. Sorry, I'm raving.
Yeah, much easier to work.
Accessibility is really important. We actually in the early years of the faculty introduction to teaching online, I had one of my colleagues, Dr. Tracy Zhou, did a whole piece on universal design for learning and how we can then incorporate that into course designs. So UDL's been in our back of our minds when we've been doing this. There's we have colleagues in wheelchairs, so we have physical accessibility was an issue for us, and that's all covered with the flat and flexible. And we also then really worked on captioning and so forth, so we could also have those captioning tools at work. So there's a little bit of accessibility going on in terms of a quick answer.
Yes, and I can see how they could plug in their own devices when they sit at the desk, or slide their wheelchairs, choose a best place where they want to look or hear better, because it's so mobile, all the furniture. Amazing.
Yeah, and that was the console in the beginning, in the middle. One of the things when I did the PBL suite was to have students have access to power. The old plug into the wall just creates a nightmare. So that was the desk design way back when. So I said, how can we make these units? And what I said to the estates people and architects, no plugs in floors. We're not having a plug in the floor. Everything has to be mobile. So then we also looked at all the battery units we could put into those mobile devices. And then we looked at the plug system so that we could have both, large plugs and, USB device plugs in there as well. So yeah, a lot of thinking about how you can have high power hungry devices catered to in that flexible environment.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, big congratulations.
You.
You should just publish the smiles. That's all, And then on Monday we had Paul Kim show us the Smile Project, the Stanford Mobile Inquiry Learning Environment Project. So we're hearing about different kinds of learning environments. Last week we heard about a learning management system for the developing world being developed by folks in Houston. Lena, we want to go to Lena's questions, and then Amelia after, and then I'll end with a couple of questions. Actually, maybe I'll have you show some of the data before we end. Just quickly show some of the research.
If you've got time,
let's see how long, if we have time left. Lena, your question.
Hey, Lena.
Hi, Susan.
Lena's a visiting scholar here from China.
Okay.
Visiting scholar.
My Chinese is not very good.
Yeah. I've been to Hong Kong and Macau, but only once, several years ago. Right. And my question is about the software. Actually, now in mainland China, lots of universities now we are using the softwares and also those facilities in the smart classroom. That's a kind of interactive classroom. And in a university, usually we only use two main kinds of software, or we call it as a platform. It's called Rain Classroom and Superstar. And in a secondary school, they use the software from iFlyTech. It's called 畅言 and also 智学 network. So I'm curious about what kind of software that you applied in Hong Kong.
Sure. So in terms of learning management systems, we're still a Moodle-based learning management system, and so we just plug in the Zoom. So adjusting the learning management system so that people could more easily, students could more easily access, for example, plugging into a Zoom. That was just something the IT guys fixed pretty quickly. In terms of various software colleagues use, there's just so much out there, you know, and we've been any sort of open source stuff people are freely able to use in Hong Kong. So what we found in our professional development, people seem to like Padlet a lot, you know, so these sorts of collaborative note-taking ones seem to be really, really good. I have unsuccessfully kept trying to promote the Novakian concept mapping software, you know, the CMAP tools. Kurt might know the whole history behind that.
I used to be a CMAP researcher, so long
there
time
you
ago.
go. Yeah. So when I joined dentistry, they had a lot of concept mapping, and I realized that the fundamental difference between a concept map and a mind map was unclear. And so, you know, one thing I really liked about CMAP tools was it forced you to create a concept map, not a mind map. And so I see lots of this freeware kind of conceptually mixes it up a bit, but the Novakian stuff, I don't know, I was successful for a little while there with dentistry, but I couldn't when I got into this level. Colleagues much prefer some of just those simple drawing tools, but I liked the way that a CMAP tool could really give you a complex concept map that showed all the links and the hierarchies and so forth, and the labels were all there automatically. Yeah, I still think it's a really nice tool. I hope that's helpful, Lena.
Yeah, I think so. One more question. Do you use smartphones in the classroom, in graduate to use as a kind of interactive tools?
Sure. I mean, our students come with, you know, generally 2 devices minimum. So they've got their laptop and they've got a phone with them. And, you know, some of them have all sorts of different note-taking devices and so forth, and iPads and all the rest of it. So, yeah, it was interesting watching a group. I was observing a teacher in a medical class, and I'm sitting at the back of the lecture hall and watching the students screen. Just fascinating, you know, like, because they're all taking notes on a collaborative note maker together, commenting on that, doing stuff with the PowerPoint notes that they've been given previously, and they just have so many windows open and they're all collaborating. It's, you know, it's a really different world to our to the slow and steady pace we're used to, that's for sure.
Okay, thank you, Susan.
So my TA last year, Christian Smeltzer, he's also my advisee. He loves these concept mapping tools, Glyphy and MindDomo, MindMeister, the CMAP tool. And many of the students in this, I don't know, 511 or this class, one of the students last week did a mind map of the discussion or a concept map of the discussion. So sometimes I have my students purposely create those mind maps. I used to use Inspiration back in the day before Inspiration became web-based, and I would have competitions in their mind maps, and we'd get, I'd give everyone $1 million of Bonker bills, my name, and they have to buy up the best. They did poster sessions on students' concept maps, and they buy up the artwork, and the people have to defend their posters artwork in effect to others in kind of a symposium.
That's great.
Poster session kind of thing. It was kind of fun. You can do all sorts of things with mind map. Miro's another one that's been demonstrated.
Yeah,
in my
Bo's
classes.
just mentioned. Yeah,
Yeah.
So Don, the instructional designer, he loves Miro. So we had so many Miro activities all the time with our professional development.
Yeah. So here's what I think: the concept mapping tools can allow you to do more critical thinking because it's more of you're creating hierarchical structures. So you're looking at logic and coherence and connectedness and in the overall hierarchy and the depth of nodes and the breadth of nodes. Whereas mind mapping is more of a brainstorming tool. You're brainstorming, piggybacking on all and hitchhiking on all these different ideas with going in whatever direction is imagined. So, in some ways, the mind map becomes a generative tool, and a CMAP can be that too, but it serves us better as a evaluative tool. And a critical thinking tool. So
and a synthesis tool.
Yes.
Another one that I haven't tried because I've gone into holiday mode. A colleague has been using decision tree analysis by mindtools.com. She really uses that a lot with her class. So that might be another one to look at. I just haven't gone into it.
At mindtools.com. Okay, we'll take a note of that.
Yeah, decision tree analysis. She's one of our most tech savvy lecturers. She likes introducing all of these tools.
So Amelia's in Japan. She originally from Kansas. Well, she's from Wisconsin, I think, like me originally, been living in Kansas City. And I think her daughter's going to college in Kansas City. Maybe not.
No, my daughter has moved back. So I am definitely in Japan now. And good morning to Susan.
Hi.
Is your daughter in high school or in college?
She was a high school student in the US and she came back to Japan and took an entrance exam as a returning student to enter what we call in Japan an escalator school, one that goes from junior high to high school to university with no more standardized exams. I think some of the people in the class might know the escalator system.
I don't. I've never heard of it, but.
Okay, well, it's good to be on an escalator if you're in a country that loves standardized entrance exams. So coming from this perspective, Susan's talk today really resonated with me because I'm a Zoomie. I've been a permanent Zoomie. You said small details in your talk that I really understood, the way you go through the training, the co-planning, the tech rehearsal when you're on Zoom, because you can get the sense of what the Zoomie is experiencing. So I just thought this was so fantastic, but I don't see any institutional buy-in for this where I am. And I actually think that higher ed in Japan really scrutinizes online learning and hybrid in a way that they don't scrutinize face-to-face. I mean, you're exclusive, you're forward thinking, we have lots of typhoons here. It just seemed that this offers so much for all the students. And I feel that it's highly, I think my question in the chat, which was very simple, is like, what do you say to the haters? I feel there's a lot of people that just don't want to get on board.
Yeah.
And everything you've given us today is just so positive.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, even in amongst my own academic development faculty members, my own staff in the center, I had folk go, oh, like one really hates the tracking camera. It really hates having that tracking camera. So felt that there were too many cameras on her in the room. And said, look, I don't want the monitors in the middle of the table. I'm just going to print pieces of paper and the group's going to work on that. But that's in a fully face-to-face group. So sure, go, use whatever works for you. So there is still, there's still the technical uptake. I did a faculty development with mainland China, with one of the medical universities there. And we did it as my own academic development staff, moderators at each of the tables, working with a breakout group with that university. And that was an interesting experiment for me in working through that. But we had, on the other side, we had lots of sound issues on their side because they were in one big room. I hadn't thought about Zoom breakout, people being in that other big room. So we had, anyway, but it was all the time, it's been a learning experience. But among my colleagues, there were people who definitely have a history of a very much didactic, paper-based approach, and that suits them and it works. So, no, I'm sure I'm telling a positive story because it's been a big journey to get to here. But, percentage of people who are picking this up, as I say, with the undergrads returning face-to-face back in classrooms, a lot of people, the return to normal is more about just give me a break and let me rest and go back rather than can I capitalize and build on. So there are some very exciting faculty members across the university doing really interesting things and winning awards for it and all the rest of it. But, I've always been concerned about how we're hitting the mainstream. One of the universities in our network had made their summer course during the pandemic compulsory. We never have gone down the compulsory PD training. It's always been, invite folk in. So working with the willing. Biggest probably, one of the biggest things that my past director did, we had started on the leadership route, and for us at Hong Kong U to be an accredited provider of the fellowships for the UK fellowship system, that brought a lot of our colleagues from generally around the university. So I think certifying in some way beyond, and we actually put forward a course that's a university accredited course instead of a faculty development attendance certificate. So building up that level of presence for your faculty development group where people actually walk away with a professional, an accredited degree or accredited certificate, that's really important to them. And the fellowship program also, I talk about portable qualifications in a mobile world. So for faculty, if we could create more portable qualifications for them that will be internationally recognized, that was something that we were working at during my term. And the fellowship scheme has gone gangbusters, as they would say, and the new PCAP program, we had full professors signing up for it, full professors signing up to do a program that was, a university teaching qualification. So interesting.
So ChatGPT sent me 2 more questions.
I'm starting to hate it already.
Yeah, I usually use Chat PDF, but tonight I use Chat GPT. And these 2 questions, if you can just quick answers, I still want to see the research if we can, just briefly here. How do you envision the future of teaching and learning in higher education, considering the rapid advancement of technology and evolving pedagogical approaches? The $20 billion question.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the Chat GPT's own question. Before I left, I had to then work with my Provost Chancellor and the whole team to run university-wide engagement with the question of AI in education, with the big question, with the policy questions, with where we're going with it. So it's really it's a whole new world. I'm sorry, guys, but for me to take a break in my career at this time has been super helpful because getting everyone through the pandemic was enough for me. And I'm like, so I'm sort of doing a bit of I don't know if you've heard Jacinta Ardern, the new Prime Minister of New Zealand, just saying she needed to just take a break. So I've been feeling very much like that. And especially facing everything that we've got coming forward with AI. What I have centered my entire academic career at Hong Kong U on is inquiry and dialogic approaches, right? So what I see is how do we make these, so this, Rupert Wegriff and his work has been in touch, dialogic education with technologies and all the things that Rupert and his group talk about. Sarah's used my dialogic. His now director, has taken over since Rupert retired. She took up the dialogic intervisualizing paper I did with Cindy Mello Silver and Judith Green and colleagues.
Cindy's in my department, you know.
Correct. Yeah. I was going to say hi. She's just been in Greece to the Learning Sciences meeting. I didn't attend this year, but yeah. So as we move forward, your big question, and this is one I put to my Pro Vice Chancellor. If we're so vulnerable in a text-based world, we're so vulnerable in terms of thinking about originality, authenticity, you know, verification, etc., of student work in particular. Oracy, dialogic approaches, the ability to coherently argue your perspective. Now that is a non-tech thing. You know, as soon as you make it a tech thing, then you'll have another device, you know, replicating you and replicating your voice and as we already see with the scammers. But, you know, inquiry-based dialogic approaches with people articulating their thinking, super important. And in terms of assessment, you know, and that's been the first concern with AI and ed. One of the things that colleagues and we've written a little paper with colleagues from dentistry, had a structured viva, and it was a beautiful task, linked to PBL, deconstructed the PBL process with a very valid and reliable assessment approach that took 1 week. And so and at the end of it, so they called it a triple jump assessment, and at the end of it, the final piece was a structured viva. And sitting there listening to a student work through a series of set questions that have all been, you know, pre-approved by the external examiners, and hearing that conversation and talking to the, you know, professor of chemistry about how she was probing understanding from a student, I thought that was real magic. So to me, these kinds of structured vivas, oral examinations, and building those skills for articulating when we're so text-based in everything we do. We're communicating from bedroom to bedroom or bedroom to kitchen on, please bring me a cup of tea with a text, you know. Well, we're going to lose our ability for oracy very soon. That's a personal rant.
You went to Griffith University, right?
University of Queensland for my undergrad, and then Griffith for my postgrad. Yeah,
there was someone at Griffith who was talking about use of oral exams.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm blanking on her name now, but our qualifying exams for a PhD program are basically oral, and it's this Friday actually. So the other question, ChatGPT, wanted to know if you have any meaningful advice to the people with us here tonight about, you know, how they could make an impact in the field of higher education or K-12 or wherever they are. I think that's kind of too big of a question. You know, it's kind of unfair, a little bit unfair question, but you know, if you have 2 nuggets of advice that have helped your career out, you know, what are a couple things that you know that served or advantageous to you that, you know, that you did? I guess one might be saying yes to advancement, because you've advanced in a lot of different things.
Sure. And you know, we named our first boat Road Not Taken, because I love the idea of 2 roads diverge in a wood and you choose the one less traveled by. Okay, so even though there are many interpretations of that poem, I still like the idea of choosing the one less traveled by. So I actually, years ago, when I took the decision to come to dentistry, I already had 2 other offers on the table. It was a lovely time for me, finishing a postdoc and then having a fellowship and having 3 offers on the table. And I took the dentistry one because it was like the others were more of the same, and this one was really different. So it challenges you, it pushes you, you learn more, you know, and all of that process is about connecting with people. I've seen people do the same sorts of things come into particularly medical education. As Maggie says about liminal spaces, it's very liminal spaces. You're on the margins, you're not a clinician. But they would say, Susan, you're the educationist. So I was a specialist as well. I had an IST. So knowing that you are bringing things to the table and that you have that imprimatur to speak, but also knowing always deferring to everyone's expertise in the room, recognizing expertise in the room, valuing what people have to say, and then moving forward in a positive way. It's very generic, fluffy stuff. I'm sorry, but it's not a silver bullet. But I think that's something that's helped my career along.
Accepting, flexible, and just welcoming and inviting for acknowledging other expertise is really critical.
Yeah.
On my research team, they're all geniuses. I mean, I'm serious, and it's not me leading. We're co-leading, and I'm following oftentimes, or I wouldn't get so much accomplished if I try to lead all the things that I'm involved in. So you have to find you have to find the right people to do that with. Can you give us the 99-second overview of your findings, just so we can see what was the result? I don't want you to go through all the details, but maybe a slide or two just to give us a sense of that. We'll call it a night for tonight.
Okay. You guys have been very patient. Thank you very much. Okay. So I've already talked about the process. So we wanted to so we actually thought about this in terms of classroom orchestration. So we went through that design-based research process, and Hoadley and Campos have published a sort of updated version. So I'm playing around with that. But capturing this complexity with real-time management of multiple learning activities within multi-constrained learning environments. So that post-digital framing in the design, but then looking at this notion of classroom orchestration and the learning sciences teams who are then moving from the original orchestration stuff to the idea of orchestration load. And that's what's capturing this complexity.
Yeah,
so we went
old
through
friend Pierre Dillenberg.
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it's the best way for me to, I've been trying to find language around what we're capturing. And I think orchestration, because that's what we're trying to do, support a teacher's orchestration of this hybrid, synchronous hybrid. And so this is the part in the co-planning. So you see me looking at the room. I was even getting everyone to orchestrate what I saw on my screen, because my text just give me every view possible. And then we were deciding what is the Zoom person going to be able to see, which camera, which all that sort of stuff, trying to think about the orienting to the Zoom perspective. And then what I liked about the notion about orchestration load, they talk about 3 facets: situation, evaluation, goal formation, and action taking. Okay, very straightforward, very simple. But it was the situation evaluation is what I found was something that caught my eye when we were going through all the video records and when I was observing in real time. So we're seeing this attentive load that the teacher, 130 students, some Zoom, some in the room, and they're regulating group-based inquiry activity. So, and I see this moment where is back to the room people, is looking at the large digital screen, and they had their multiple group work all being shared on there, and they were working on these collaborative documents, and he was reviewing those. And he just stood there and he'd be reviewing those. And then he would turn and move to a group. So I thought that moment of that situation evaluation was critical for his orchestration. So he's reviewing what everyone's doing in their Zoom room breakouts, and then he turns and goes and joins group X. And so I thought that was an interesting moment, because I thought he'd be looking at the social aspect of looking at who's online and so forth. He was oriented with the large screen to the cognitive, to the situation evaluation as a cognitive epistemic knowledge building. And then when he went to the groups, it was all about the social. So I sort of had this notion about co-designing the spaces, co-designing the pedagogies. And then I thought, what are some of the takeaways from thinking about that hybrid orchestration? So we've got the Zoom room as another presence and how we cognitively and socially orchestrate that. But I've been talking with colleagues about in these inquiry-based approaches, role clarifications of, in a PBL, you have specific roles, who's the scribe, etc. And what are the ground rules for interactions? And you go through that process. So how do we do that in a hybrid team? How do we create roles that are specific for both Zoomies and on a face-to-face? And how do we create ground rules for interactions? And one simple tip I developed out of this was to say, okay, when we're in a synchronous hybrid and a group is reporting, I asked the teacher to always ask a Zoom person to be the reporter. So that Zoom person did the group report rather than the physical person in the room. That was a quick takeaway. So it's an Imaginarium. I think I've given you already all of those links, Kurt, and I'll just quickly copy this one from this one, which was the U21 Learning Environment case studies, because I think you might be able to grab that as well.
And Bo can grab that link and share it with the class after class. The people who weren't here, we can get that in the listserv, and also put it into Canvas, in the thread there in Canvas, Bo. That'd be really great.
Because there's about 5 universities, and we only had the conference in July, just as I was flying back. Yeah.
Are they universities in Singapore and Hong Kong?
No, so this is Universitas 21. Their learning environment case studies are mainly UK and Europe.
Okay. There was a Universidad 21 a long time ago that was headed up by a Singaporean university.
Right.
I forget all the players that were involved in. Thank you very much. And everyone give her a big round of applause, or, like this, to come in, while you're on break. Kind of, is this a permanent break, or just a 1 month or 1 year break? You don't know. You don't have to answer the question, but
I don't know. So officially from Hong Kong, we retire at 60. Yeah. So it's the official Hong Kong process is retirement at 60. Coming back home, everyone's looking at me going, and are you really? And I'm like, I don't know yet. So we shall see what 24 brings. Let's just see. But I've had great fun reconnecting in the academic space after being holiday touristing and hosting weddings for kids and stuff like that. So really lovely to engage with you all and talk about this work that I have to write up for you, right, Kurt?
Yes, so I'm doing a special issue of the Internet and Higher Education on online professional development, and that's how she contacted me. That's how Susan contacted me. She's working on a paper related to the special issue. I said, this sounds like a topic that's good for this class. So I will say, it's a delight to have someone who's so knowledgeable and so experienced in the area and topics that are applicable to this class. And I scheduled a lot of people, but you definitely fit in as well as, if not better than, most of the people I have scheduled for this semester. So it's just wonderful to have you join us as an add-on, but I really think it's a important integration into this class, because we will build on what you said when we get to learning environment design and what IU is doing in a couple of weeks. I will want to point out in here, and next week, I just confirmed we're going to have Dr. Jihan Osman, a former student of mine who was at American University of Cairo, but now she is the senior advisor for teaching and learning innovations at the British University in Egypt. I will be in Cairo, and she'll show me around in 2 weeks. There won't be any synchronous sessions during that week. That's why I'm bringing her in early. So she'll be next week, Thursday at noon Eastern time. Also on Thursday, we're going to hear from Danielle McNamara from Arizona State, who is the director of the SOLET Lab, which is engineering education. And so that's both of them next Thursday, one at noon, one at 5:30 Eastern time. The following Monday, we're going to have one of the most famous people in all of education, Dr. Chris Deedy from Harvard, who's a futurist who I read it in graduate school, and I'm sure Susan's heard a bit about his work on immersive worlds and AI and whatnot. Chris is a thought leader and a podcast partner of mine every week. So he's I've never had him as a guest, and so he'll be coming in at 7 o'clock Eastern on the 18th. Those are the 3 people lined up before I go to Cairo. And those are the only 3 people as of this point until I come back from Cairo. So again, thanks, Susan. Do you have any final, before I close this to the cloud, do you have any final words of wisdom for the people watching this recording?
Oh, I'll just say to everybody, like, it's really fun to be able to have the opportunity to redesign, go from the learning experience, go from what's going to be best for your learner and how you're going to bring the space and your colleagues along on that journey for you, with you and for them. So thanks very much. I put the link to the Learning Lab because it's got more on specifications if colleagues actually want to follow up on the tech stuff. So if you want to browse around the lab website. All the very best of luck to you all.
Thank you again. And this is being recorded to the cloud, week 3, part 2, I guess, of a guest in this class.